Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the AI Analyst with a question mark, because I don't know what AI is going to do to our roles or our jobs or the field. And that's the point of the series, to explore that. My name is Andy Cotgreave, co-founder of How to Speak Data, keynote speaker, writer, and advisor. And I'm here with Mark. Mark, say hi. Tell us.
Hey, everybody. Mark Brocato, lead engineer of Tonic's Fabricate product. And in fact, the creator of Fabricate, which used to be my own company. And Tonic acquired my partner and I over a year ago now. And so Fabricate is this wonderful tool for generating data using AI, and perhaps using AI for one of the things it's definitely fit for, which is making stuff up and making up realistic stuff.
I mean, that phrase "making stuff up" sounds like it's the good and bad of AI, right? Isn't it? So I think I called you head of engineering in all my blurb for this, so maybe I gave you a promotion. It's great to have you here, Mark. The first thing I'm going to do is just show everybody a little bit of how Fabricate works. This came about. This whole event came about really because I've been using Fabricate to make fake data for a training course I'm doing. So I had to make loads of different fake data sets, and then as I've been speaking to Tonic and telling them how much I've enjoyed using the product, obviously the world of synthetic data is a lot bigger. So we're going to talk about that with Mark over the next 30 minutes. But this is how Tonic works. I'm going to kick this off and then we'll come back to it later. I've got a prompt here. Let's say I'm an event manager for a large BI company who's just had a conference. Oh, I nearly said it. Create me an event feedback system. So I want speakers, sessions, door scans, etc. I'm going to give Fabricate some agency, but keep it robust and elegant. Oh, and I've just realized I missed the last bit of the bit on the keyboard is don't make it too big, because otherwise we might be here all day. All right. So Fabricate is going to do its stuff. While that is happening, let's go back to Mark. Have a chat. So Mark, I came to Tonic saying, "Oh, look, I've made all these tiny little small data sets that are great for a training course," and you guys are, yeah. But the synthetic data is way bigger. So tell me, just give me the overview. What's going on with synthetic data?
Oh yeah. So Fabricate is used for just so many different things. I mean, the most common use case is probably the one you might expect, which is I've got this large, complicated relational database. I sort of understand what's in it. I need a really good test data set mostly for software testing. Sometimes it's for demos. Here's my schema. Fabricate, figure out how to make me a realistic data set. But Fabricate is also quite commonly used for generating flat files, oftentimes for simulating the type of data you as a software developer might be getting from your partners, like banks getting feeds of transactions from partners, things like that.
Yeah.
It's also quite popular for generating data to push into APIs. Everybody who's working on software is working on a constellation of systems and microservices and databases and files. And part of that constellation is inevitably some third-party APIs that they need to simulate or populate. So Fabricate will generate data to push into those APIs, and then it can also mock those APIs. So if you don't actually want to store data in a Stripe sandbox or something, but you just want to mock Stripe, Fabricate can do that as well. And then we have a whole host of customers that are using Fabricate just to generate documents. So fake prospectuses or fake receipts, things like that. So it's actually quite good at generating unstructured data in PDF documents as well. And then there's a sort of tip of the spear, or maybe the edge of innovation, which is around training models, mostly AI models. And there's a chicken and the egg problem with AI. The companies that have the data to train models on are the big enterprises that have been around forever and are the least likely ones to dive into training their own AI models and to move quickly and to lead the sort of innovation there. So the companies that are building their own models, doing reinforcement learning, are the ones that have access to no real world data. And it certainly aren't going to be able to buy them from the large enterprise companies because they know what they have in parlance. So we get a lot of requests for, hey, can Fabricate generates synthetic data that we can use to train our AI, which is probably a very interesting existential question for your audience.
Yes.
Like, does that lead to model collapse or not? It's an open-ended thing, but Fabricate is being used for that right now to generate like hyper-realistic data across time to simulate environments for reinforcement learning. So we're putting a lot of our effort into improving that right now.
But what is your perspective on model collapse?
Well, the world is going to run out of data one way or another, because really think about it. How much data now is being generated by AI? I would imagine the majority of the code being written is probably an understatement to say is being generated by AI. So AI was able to do all this amazing work training on code. Not anymore. Now it's training on code written by other AI. So, it's still guided by humans, but whether or not you like it, the majority of the world's data is going to be AI generated at some point anyway. So that's unavoidable. I think right now, there's some clear use cases where it makes sense, and it probably is not that controversial, which is if you're taking an expensive, like super intelligent model like Opus and using that to generate very realistic data to train a much cheaper model, that's probably fine. That's essentially distilling, which is it's a great cost savings. But that the world is going to reach a cliff at some point where how do we innovate or how do we evolve if the AI God machine is just repeating the same thing over and over again and training on its own output, eating its own tail? I don't know.
Yeah, we wait and see feels like a really churlish response, but we're going to have to see what happens. So let me go back a step. As I've been talking to people about this and telling people how much I like Fabricate, people are like, a lot of people said, well, Claude is really good at creating fake data. Why would I use Fabricate? Now, I've come up with an answers, but I'm sure you're hearing that comment. So what's Fabricate doing? What's Fabricate doing? But what do synthetic data companies or customers need that Claude doesn't provide?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I think confidence has never been higher that everybody thinks they can build everything themselves. Fabricate is a purpose-built harness, not unlike Claude Code or Cursor, but instead of targeting coding, we're targeting data generation. And so all of the sort of like instructions and APIs and patterns and connectivity that it has built into it is all targeted at connecting to real-world databases, generating like high fidelity real world data with a high degree of integrity. And then also, what's coming here in the next few days that I'm quite excited about is sort of independent review from a validation agent on the data that gets generated. So like sort of real-time scrutiny on the level of realism of the data that's being generated as part of the feedback loop. And that actually yields like quite amazing results. It's sort of funny. We as humans are really good at creating more humans, and we've sort of created another human in AI and reproduced the best and worst qualities of humans. And one of them is that I've seen in Fabricate, if you have an agent that's generating data and an independent agent, even with the same brain, it's all Opus underneath the hood, reviewing that data, boy, the one that's doing the QA certainly finds a lot of problems with the one that wrote the code to generate the data. It's just like humans, software engineers and QA engineers. So we'll be releasing that as part of our main feedback loop within a few days now. And the quality of data that can generate with a user with just a naive prompt of like the one you showed, like, here's what I need, here's what I want. I don't know how to get it, but AI take the wheel. We think the results are much better with Fabricate at a much lower price point than with Cursor. Like with the right prompting and enough time, you probably could build something for a specific project with something like a Cursor or a Claude to generate good data. But we're aiming at making something that large teams can use with no training and not a lot of investment in terms of time and learning to generate really good data without having to be software engineers.
And I agree, and the fact that I find it really powerful that Fabricate can just create a really robust schema, right? And all the tables relate, all the foreign keys are robust, and then that is maintained between sessions because the data exists separate to the sort of the session you might be having with Claude. In fact, should we go back? Let's go back to the data set. Fabricate has built my data set, right? So just as an example of what's going on. So I got asked a whole bunch of questions, clarifying questions, which Fabricate asked me, which I answered as Mark was talking. And then we've got all these tables, right? So we've got sessions. I find the text is always pretty cool. So look at this. We've got an opening keynote. Dashboards this sounds just like the type of conference I go. Dashboards that drive decisions, and we've got feedback, right? So in fact, who are our speakers? So we got head of analytics. Sometimes Tonic uses real company names, and sometimes it makes them up. This time it has made them up. And this is amazing, right? So we've got full integrity, and this I think is really part of the power. What's happening? What's happening behind the scenes that is sort of creating all of this ability?
Yeah. So at the heart of it is we had to build a really good agent and a really good harness, and the two main parts of that are really the storage mechanism. So Fabricate has to have a really good way of storing and organizing and cross-querying the data as it's generating it, because it has to sort of come up with a plan for building the data upon itself. Like if it's, let's say that you have customers and orders or something like that, or like speakers and events. When you're generating the events data, you need to do that after you generate the customer or the speakers data, because you want to reference the speaker IDs when you're, populating the speaker ID in the event. And so we have an internal database mechanism based on SQLite underneath the hood that it can use to store and organize the data as it's generating it. And then, probably the biggest thing is the code sandbox. So Fabricate generates its data for the most part by using AI to write and execute ad hoc code on the fly. And so, the big breakthrough there is like, there's no configuration language. There's no knobs and buttons to click. You just express your intent, and it figures out how to write that code on the fly and execute it. And so, you can imagine there's a lot of work put into making a code sandbox that's secure and fast and can connect to databases and all that sort of good stuff. So those are the two, things sort of at the heart of it. And then a lot of instructions and skills and drivers to connect to various databases, and some pretty big pieces as well. Like Fabricate has the ability to profile a database. And so you could, if you're able to connect to production or a seed database, you can say, hey, like, here's my production database. I don't really know much about what's in it, but you go figure out what's in it. You find all the statistical properties of that database, like how many orders there are per customer, or what's the histogram of ages of my customers, or where they're located in the world, and then recreate all of that just sort of automatically in my test data set. So there's a whole subsystem for doing that sort of profiling as well.
I find it's been amazing using it, right? So who are the best speakers? Okay, so I don't love the chart, but I can see it's created some great speakers. So Ronald is the best, and Griffin. Sorry, Griffin. That's a terrible feedback score. And what's been really positive for me is that this agent is genuinely really powerful and helpful. I haven't managed to get it. I haven't found a prompt that it couldn't cope with, because it's right. Whereas a lot of platforms, you ask it to do something and it just doesn't know how. But you have that nice mix that I can go and edit the cells directly as well if I want, right? So I can fix all that data out. And I think you've done remarkably well. So I guess, is there a mix? Is one of the things, how do you manage token usage, right? Because there's lots of free text, there's lots of data. Is if I do this exercise in Claude, is it just going to burn through tokens?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. So I mean, we have found that Fabricate is much cheaper in terms of token usage than something off the shelf like Claude, because it gets to the point a lot faster. It's like building less things from scratch. But yeah, broadly, we've sort of optimized it for trying to use the tokens to understand your requirements, your database, your data model, ask questions, and write code, rather than using the tokens to generate individual items of data. But the AI, when it writes its code, can actually call back into a cheaper model. Right now, it's the Haiku model for generating like free text. So if you actually wanted to have like the summary of the talk, or even like a telephone transcript, or a set of like group chats, it can do a very context-aware generation of that free text using that cheaper model. So we've certainly taken costs into account. We've done a lot of work on prompt caching to try to keep those costs down. And then probably in the next few days, we're going to release support for other models as well. So right now, there is no place to choose a model in Fabricate.
Right.
But you'll be able to choose between Opus, GPT-5.5, GPT-5.4, which is actually half the cost of 5.5, and then 5.3 Codex, which I think is even cheaper. And we might have certain opinions about which should be the defaults for different things, but you'll be able to pick between those. And we're sort of adding models all the time now. And it's sort of funny. I think a lot of people now understand the personalities of those different models. They've gotten to know them, and they sort of know when to pick one versus the other.
And I was reading some stats on Gartner, and they were making some crazy predictions about the size of the market. Did they? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to. I can't find the number, but it was like hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars worth. Is the market size? Is that right?
Oh, I have no idea. No, that is above my pay grade, or at least outside of my knowledge base. The amount of money being thrown around in the AI world now is just sort of stunning. But
yeah. So let's there's the Gartner people up there doing their things. But tell me about you. How in our prep call, I asked you this question. It's like, I don't think there's many people who go to college or school and go like, I want to get into fake data. That's the career. But you've been doing this for a long time, right? Previously,
for a long time. Yeah. So I
what happened? How did you fall into this?
I fell into it because I created this thing that just became popular sort of on its own, called Makaru, which is still, I think, the #1 result on Google for like, I need to generate fake data. And I got into it because I was leading engineering at a small life sciences company. And problem with a lot of companies that are in very niche domains like that is you don't learn that domain in everyday life. Like this was cancer research. And so I was responsible for a team of software developers and a team of QA engineers. And the QA engineers didn't have deep knowledge in this very specific domain. And so when they would hand author test data, it was often very, very poor quality, which led to very poor tests and poor quality in the application because of that. And so I literally just wanted to give them something that allowed them to easily make good quality data so that the validity of the test was just much better. And so out of sort of like frustration, I threw together this thing that eventually became Makaru. I used it as an internal tool for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And then to sort of scratch an itch, because that was, I'm sure a lot of developers out there can empathize with this. That was one of those companies that was selling a product that was like, if there was 100 users on a given day, that was a lot, but it was a very expensive product that was in a niche. And so I wanted to build something that a lot more people would have access to, and just be able to affect a lot more people's sort of time and productivity. And so I asked the company, hey, could I like throw this up on the internet and see if it could become a product, like it's a side project? And they were like, yeah, sure. We don't care about that. We're off doing this other thing that's way more important. So I threw it up there, and I sort of like lightly promoted it in a very naive way by answering a few posts on Stack Overflow. And this was like, I don't know, 2013 or something like that.
Yeah.
A long time ago, when the internet was a much more simple place. And it was like a legitimate answer for several questions that got upvoted. And then that sort of bootstrapped the traffic. And then, probably within a few months, it was like #1 on Google, and it got tons and tons and tons of users. And, eventually I fell into a partnership with Tonic that I, did for many years through Makaru. And then when it was sort of time for me to move on from my day job, I, I'm close friends with the founders of Tonic, and I was talking to them about, my sort of plans for Makaru and this next thing that I was going to build called Fabricate. And they were like, interesting. So I wound up building it, launching it, and they wound up requiring it. And now I work for Tonic, and I'm loving it.
So obviously I worked at Tableau for 15 years, and a lot of the sales engineers, we all used to use Makaru like extensively because, you're trying to solve a problem for a customer or show something to a customer, and then finding the data set was just so tedious because you could spend ages Googling Kaggle or just for public data sets, but it was never quite right. You could make up your own data, but that was just a pain in the ass. And Makaru was really the only no code. I mean, there were some Python libraries that can do it, have been around for a while, but it was certainly a great no code application. So, certainly a lot of people I've worked with over the last 10 years used Makaru, but it was still hard work to get a good data set. You had to put the effort in. So what were the transition points where you realized, when did you start realizing that LLMs were sort of encroaching in a really amazing way on the model that Makaru had started and obviously got replaced?
It's interesting that Fabricate, as it is now, that is this sort of AI native studio for generating data. I didn't really get started on that until like last summer. So Fabricate actually started out as just a sort of on steroids version of Makaru that could handle multiple tables, like an entire database at once instead of a single flat file. But then as we released that, and as I was sort of experimenting with AI agents, it sort of dawned upon me, perhaps later than it should have, that AI is sort of ready to be able to take on this problem. And I very much empathize with what you're saying, because probably in Makaru's heyday, you could absolutely, that was a main use case of I need data for a demo, but that was like a project. Like you would sit down with Makaru and that would be like a whole day's work, or maybe you may not even have a team that's dedicated to using Makaru to do this sort of stuff. Now, I demo Fabricate 3 times a day. The amount of time I spend prepping for a demo is 5 minutes. It's find the right prompt, put it in Fabricate, make sure it generates the whole database right, and then I'm ready for my demo. So, I think the folks at Tableau or anywhere else that are now using Fabricate, it really cuts down on your prep time. You can crash for a demo in 5 minutes before you get on with the customer and have the data in hand.
That's so funny because the prep for this demo was. I went into Gemini and I was like, this is what I want, and then I said, just give me the prompt. Anyway, so it gave me the prompt, which became what I pasted into Fabricate at the start of this, and that took me about 5 minutes.
And my prep for demos is I actually use Gemini as well, and I have a gem saved that basically describes generally how I do demos, and I just tell it the name of the company. It spits out a schema that's relevant to that company, and then I just drop that schema in Makaru, and that's my demo. So it's the amount of productivity that it's cut into from going from having to code this stuff yourself to Makaru, which is a huge leap forward, and this is another 10x leap forward.
So it's not really a downside. One of the effects of using LLMs is sometimes things happen differently, right? So I ran that prompt 3 times, right? So I've got various projects with various versions of it. This is the first time it asked me questions. Before the previous 2 times, it just created the schema straight away. How, just generally, I mean, well, you can talk about how Fabricate is probabilistic, but generally, how does this probabilistic issue of LLM output impact Fabricate and the industry more widely?
It's there's a lot to LLMs that's sort of a dark art that nobody understands, is a black box. If you've ever looked at Claude Code or Cursor's prompts, the sort of system prompt is quite large. It's like an entire employee handbook. And so you don't have deterministic controls over how the LLM will think. You just sort of have wordsmithing, and you can run eval tests, and you can experience it anecdotally. But it can be a somewhat frustrating thing. We want to guide the agent in the right direction, but we also want the agent to be an agent and think on its feet. One of the best things about this approach to solving this problem or any problem of having an AI agent do it is that when it inevitably encounters the things that you said, oh, no customer will ever do that, or I just didn't even think of that, it digs its way out like immediately. And even if it struggles, like oftentimes the customer just like giving it a hint or something can help it dig its way out of a problem that we never envisioned. And so that non-determinism, it cuts both ways. Like it has some very good qualities to it. And there is a facility in Fabricate called Workflows, where if you want to build data generation routines that behave the same way every time, it can encode that in a workflow, and then that'll run deterministically because that's just code. But yeah, like Fabricate is sort of trained to make decisions on its own. And so if you provide it less context, it is trained to ask questions. But in the end, there's only so many questions it can ask before it's like, all right, come on, let's go and generate this data. So it has an autonomous mode where it actually won't ask any questions. And it will always sort of try to use its best judgment. It'll be interesting to see when we release this validation agent. One of the most fun things to watch is how the coding agent fights with the QA agent. And they eventually have to come to an agreement on what's good enough.
Do they do that? Have you found that?
It's early, so I've only had this thing sort of running and testing for a few days now. I've always seen it converge, thankfully. I was really worried that it would never converge and they would just be like, fighting with each other forever. But it normally converges within a few turns. The validation agent does catch a lot of things, no matter how you prompt that coding agent, unless it's, of the mindset of like, I'm checking data that's already been generated. There will be some problems with it, and that validation agent will catch them, and it will eventually get a really nice set of data.
I was speaking to the CEO of a small UK analytics startup a couple of weeks ago, and they'd implemented 2 Clawbot agents in their organization. I think one was they were in different domains of the business. I don't remember what they were, but so let's say one was in sales and one was in HR or legal. I mean, that wasn't quite right. But they did find each other and start using each other's arguments to persuade employees one way. It's like, oh, this agent said that, therefore I'm now saying this.
Oh my god!
Which I find is fascinating, and to some levels that there's a bit of pushback against AI, right? And I actually think you've reminded me and people of the brilliant. It has to. We give it agency to enable it to be creative and productive, but where's the line of acceptable decision making?
And I'm sort of privileged, I think, to be working with AI in a very benign use case.
Yes.
In that, as I said at the beginning, everybody complains about hallucination. Well, we're actually leveraging that for good here. Like, we want the AI to hallucinate a reality that doesn't exist because we want really realistic data. Despite the fact that I'm in tech and I work with AI, I'm probably as distrustful of AI as the next person, or maybe more so. But fortunately, the way that I'm applying it here, I feel quite good about, because I think this is definitely a thing that humans don't want to be hand authoring realistic data, or even worrying about this very boring job.
80% right is certainly not good enough when you're doing production data analysis, but 80% right, or maybe 90% right, is fine in synthetic data, right? Because sometimes you want to see those anomalies. You are in a benign part,
and it all has to be made up anyway. I mean, in fact, there is a very nice sort of security aspect of Fabricate, in that a lot of the customers that come to us, they could use production data, and that would be great for testing. Their tests would be great if they would find all the real bugs. But that's totally illegal. Like, you can't be just winging customer data around and letting everybody look at it. And so, Tonic's sort of bread and butter is enabling customers to leverage production data in an anonymized fashion for testing. And so Tonic's original product, Structural, took the sort of approach of like, okay, find all the sensitive data, anonymize it, and then let the rest of the data pass through. And for certain industries, that's not a strong enough guarantee because they don't know that you're finding all of the sensitive data. So Fabricate is actually a stronger guarantee because it's basically like, well, it's going to make up everything. It might do a statistical profile of your production data, but there's not a single item of data left in that profile. It's all just stats. And then from there, it makes it all up from scratch. And so, we're...
Okay, where's the boundary of that? I wonder if I can find the project. How do I find my different projects? Like,
if you click on the logo in the top left, it'll go to the home.
Oh, all right, I won't find it. Anyway, so the previous time I made the event feedback data, it was people from Tableau, from Snowflake, from DBT. So it was genuine companies. And the worst speaker was somebody from Snowflake, right? So is there ever a risk that fake data could create that synthetic data could create synthetic stories that actually escape into the wild and become?
There is, and different customers have different perspectives on that. Like some customers want the realest data possible because they're training an AI model, and like any sort of deviation from reality just weakens the strength of that model. And then some customers go so far in the opposite direction of like, I need realistic phone numbers, but how can you guarantee that none of those phone numbers, if I call them, is going to ring an actual phone, or none of the emails are going to arrive in an actual inbox? So, Fabricate has to make choices about that based on what the user's input. How real to be, and it's essentially up to the user, but there's a fine line there.
It's fascinating.
I know, like Makaru over the years always generated fairly realistic emails, and I know I've gotten once every 5 years a complaint of somebody who said, "Hey, I use this in testing, and I mass mailed to a bunch of people that replied back, stop spamming me." Like, well, you want realistic data, you got it.
I find myself becoming quite fond of some of the employees I've created for a coffee chain data set. Some of them are having a hard time because the coffee stores are too busy, and I'm like, come on. So look, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Was there anything you wanted to show before we wrap up? Do you think we've covered everything?
I think we've covered most things. I can't quite show the validation agent stuff yet, but look out for that in the next week or so. That's going to be really fun. And one of the things I'm going to be testing out is which is the best model as the validator, and which is the best model as the agent that manages to write the code that has the fewest findings for the validator.
Yeah.
So right now, if I predict, just based on my own coding experience, I know Codex, GPT-5.3 Codex is a real stickler for details. I bet that it's the best for validation. For coding, I have a lot more experience with Opus, but I've had very good luck with GPT 5.5 as well. So it's going to come down to one of those two. I'd be interested to see if right now that the validation finds a lot of problems with what Opus writes. I wonder if it'll find as many with what GPT 5.5 writes. That'll be an interesting experiment to sort of have.
Well, let's leave that question hanging, and we'll have to follow you on LinkedIn to find out the answer in the next month or two. So there's a QR code and a free trial. If you're watching and want to go and check out Tonic, Fabricate, I genuinely, it's just been one of the most fun platforms I've used. Certainly the most integrated AI agent into a task, or certainly the one with the most success. So I think you guys have done a really good job. So thank you for making Fabricate. Where can people find you, Mark?
LinkedIn, Twitter as well. If you search for Makaru on Twitter, I'm there, Makaru Dev on Twitter. And then fabricate.tonic.ai. If you have 2 minutes to crash and prep for a demo and you need data, give Fabricate a try. I don't think it'll let you down.
Yeah, and then you can export the whole thing into a CSV or into a Postgres database and put it into your servers, and you'll be up and running in no time at all.
In fact,
all right.
you can connect Fabricate directly to your database as well. So if you happen to have an RDS database, or like I use Neon a lot for demos, shout out to Neon. You can spin one of those up in like seconds and then have Fabricate generating data directly into that database. So if you're really strapped for time, it's a good approach.
If AI can save us time so we can go and spend more time outdoors rather than do more work, I'm all in favor of that. Brilliant. Awesome. All right. Well, Mark, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for talking about synthetic data, fake data, and thanks for attending. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you all on the next episode. Take care, everybody. Bye.